Books presents The Body on the Roundabout, written by Faith Eckersall and read by Jonathan Keeble. Prologue. Page 6, The Guardian, 14th of January 2021. A journalist who was sentenced to a year in prison after admitting breaches under the Data Protection Act has seen his sentence suspended on appeal. Harold Rupert Hedges, 37, of Fulham, London, had admitted to breaking the law while working as a correspondent for the Daily News newspaper, but went on to appeal the sentence. In a statement released after the hearing, Daily News proprietor Sir James Knox described Hedges as a disgrace to our industry and our nation, and said there was no place for this type of reprehensible behaviour in his or any other publication. Chapter 1. The red petrol light had been flashing since the Bournemouth Spur Road. Now the amber oil light had decided to join it. All his ancient Mini Cooper needed next was the battery light to start up, and his dashboard would resemble the full Blackpool illuminations. Harry felt as if he'd been on the A31 forever. Thank God he was nearly there. He indicated right, started driving north on the A350, and after several miles found himself approaching a large roundabout, from which assorted foliage bristled like a giant green and yellow pirate's beard. Where was the bloody sign? Too late, he clocked the notice indicating that the centre of historic Piddlington Minster was the exit he'd just missed. He jammed down his right brogue on the accelerator as he made another attempt to arrive nearly on time at his new place of work. As he did so, a small elderly woman on the pavement suddenly brandished what appeared to be a placard on a stick right in front of the bonnet. Harry yelped and closed his eyes as he swerved away from her. As he opened them again, he shuddered. The last thing he needed was another brush with the police. The old girl must be off her head. He immediately juddered to a halt, having managed to place his size 11 foot on the postage stamp-sized brake pedal. A 6'3" journalist isn't ever a good idea in a vintage Cooper. Judging by the car horn symphony behind him, you'd think he'd stopped in the middle of the M25, not this obscure Dorset backwater. Harry flipped his blonde fringe out of the way and looked round for the placard-waving pensioner, who had mysteriously disappeared. He beamed nervously into his rear-view mirror at the baleful woman driver of the tractor-sized motor which had nearly shunted him. Looking like a younger and taller version of Hugh Grant used to be such an advantage in life, he thought. Nowadays, he may as well resemble Donald Trump for all the good it did him. He fiddled the sulky gear stick into neutral and gently turned the ignition. Nothing. Unless you counted the flashing lights. Harry began to feel immensely warm under his tweed jacket, which was far too heavy for early September, but the only one he possessed now. The bailiffs had seized all the others when he stopped paying rent on his flat. "Sorry," he said, as if every other driver backed up behind him could hear. He tried the starting procedure again. Miraculously, the car sputtered into life. Ramming the gear into first, he successfully exited towards the town centre, trying to ignore the radio which had jolted into life again and was fading in and out of two separate news bulletins, surreally jumbling a story about antiques thefts and the rate of inflation. According to the guidebook he'd surreptitiously thumbed through at the M3 service station as he fled London, his ancient iPhone had long been out of data. Piddlington Minster could be approached in three ways. He was coming over the stone humpbacked bridge option, which afforded heart-stopping views of the twin-towered Minster, a mellow medieval building which looked as if it had been lovingly constructed from artisanal loaves, glowing in the sunshine. If Jasper Grant, his former schoolchum and newsroom boss at the Daily News, was correct, and Harry wouldn't put it past him to have lied about this too, following the road should allow him to find his new office quite easily, as he spooled through the town's one-way system. Having overshot the correct route, he found himself in what looked to be the town square, clattering past a knot of youths on bikes, a health food store, and a statue of Queen Victoria, who was glaring right at him. He was looking for the newspaper's premises. In the old days, 20 years ago probably, A paper like the Piddlington Gazette would have occupied the best part of a beautiful Georgian building, all symmetrical sash windows like a doll's house. It would have had a Downing Street-type door, complete with a spiderweb fanlight and a hand-painted sign, proudly declaring that this was the office of your local newspaper. But those days were long gone, melted away with publishing it all for free online, a collapse in advertising, and the faint but lingering taint caused by various journalistic scandals. So while he knew he was looking for a Georgian building with 3 steps up to the front and a door in Arsenal red, as Jasper had put it, he also knew that this part of the edifice, the good bit, was now occupied by a lifestyle boutique. Jasper had explained that he'd probably have to guide the Cooper through the building's old coaching entrance at the side and into a courtyard where he'd find the former outbuilding which now housed the newspaper.
"They used to keep pigs there," said Jasper. "Supposed to be haunted by a 2-headed pig, or so it goes."
Harry had asked him how he knew that, and been answered with a chuckle,
"Must have done a story on it back in the day."
He'd been so desperate to work again that he grabbed the opportunity. So long as there's a parking space, Harry prayed. The parking space was crucial, because it would mean he would have to pay out less money. And that was vital, for the simple reason that he didn't really have any. What had happened, and the resulting court case had seen to that. Paying the barrister had burned through the inheritance left by his mother, Isabella, and he was living on an overdraft the size of Wembley Stadium. Of course, he could have accepted his father's kind offer to integrate him into the family's luxury waste paper basket manufacturing business as a means of paying off his gargantuan bills. But that would have meant giving up journalism. Frankly, he'd rather cut off his right hand, which would be far less painful than doing a proper job, he reckoned, especially in luxury waste paper baskets. After extricating himself from St. Basil's College Sixth Form, he joined a regional weekly, working there 2 weeks until his interview with the notorious Colombian drug baron El Rato went global. As someone who enjoyed the happy knack of being in the right place at the right time, and often with exactly the right people, he didn't see the point of telling anyone that he'd only obtained the world exclusive after freeing the notorious criminal, and it turned out clandestine claustrophobe, from a locked toilet during an unscheduled layover at Sao Paulo airport. Harry had promised not to reveal the sobbing gangster's embarrassing secret in exchange for the interview everyone wanted, before segueing seamlessly onto the daily news. As he braked, gently this time, not wanting to miss the newspaper's entrance, his excitement rose at the thought of actually getting into a newsroom again. It would be the first step in his grand plan to rehabilitate himself and earn a few quid to help pay back his father for his assistance with the legal bills. Newspaper work had provided Harry with a fabulous living and helped fill the hideous void of loneliness and pain he'd fallen into after Isabella's death. His handsome face, velvety brown eyes, and ability to make interviewees feel as if he'd spent his entire life waiting to meet them had landed him a string of effortless front-page splashes, not to mention some reasonably successful investigations. From getting Princess Anne to admit she'd sung Happy Birthday to her horse, to El Rato, he'd sailed along. Until that fateful day, when an envelope of what appeared to be conversation transcriptions had arrived on his desk with a scribbled note about turning them into stories. He'd been busy at the time, working until stupid o'clock each night, so he'd just added the extra work to his pile and cracked on. When he'd mentioned it to Violet Travers, his long-term reporter colleague with whom he'd enjoyed a brief liaison, she'd shaken her long, glossy dark hair and sympathized.
"Tell me about it. I've been working on them all day, too. Should we complain to Jasper, do you think?"
Even now, like a comedy thermometer, he felt the heat of shame travelling up his neck and face. Never having had any formal journalism training, he hadn't realised the transcriptions were of recordings which had been illegally obtained. Violet had been broken up for him when it all came out.
"My God, Harry, how has this even happened?"
But then had come the rumours, the police investigation, and the reckoning. Jasper had ordered them to his office and put it brutally simply.
"This is what's known in the trade as a monumental fuck-up," he raged.
The bastard politicos were on the rampage, and the organisation needed to look willing. He needed someone to admit to the wrongdoing.
It's you or her. I'm going out now, so you can sort it out between you.
In the end, the choice was surprisingly easy. Firstly, because he knew that unlike him and Jasper, the tear-blotched Violet had been raised in the kind of London postcode where gritty police dramas about violent drug gangs were filmed. She hadn't gone to a posh school. She'd started working at the newspaper as a cleaner. He knew and understood how hard she'd had to slave for everything she'd achieved. And secondly, after arriving back in his office and ordering Violet to get a tissue, Jasper told Harry that if he fessed up to it being his idea and went quietly, it would all blow over and he'd get a caution tops and his job back. So he said yes. And very soon found himself the poster boy for everything that was wrong with the British press. Thank God his father was so wealthy that he could afford the kind of barrister who specialised in convincing flinty judges that everything that had happened was simply a frightful mix-up. It had been, therefore, a frightful shock to find himself sentenced to a year in prison. This had entailed a sizable chunk of the family fortune being spent on convincing even flintier appeal judges that an eye-watering fine and the public shredding of his character were punishment enough. As he swung into the first part of the one-way system, past a row of Georgian and Victorian buildings belonging to solicitors and estate agents, he spotted the Life and Style store on the right with its glossy red door, and there was the passageway at the side. For once in his life, Jasper Grant had told the truth. As he changed down and manoeuvred the Mini towards the cobbled entrance, Harry grimaced. It had been over 2 years now, but he still couldn't smother the horror of being marched away from the newsroom, head bowed so he didn't have to see the mortified faces of his colleagues, as the Operation Knacker coppers pretended they were arresting Gordon Gekko in Wall Street. As he drove through the narrow brick archway into a courtyard, he looked up to see a faded wooden sign propped against the flaking whitewashed wall of the one-storey building at the courtyard's rear. The Piddlington Gazette. After parking the Cooper, he turned off the engine, shoved open the door and stepped out, straight onto a giant dog turd. A sickening odour zoomed up his nostrils. Oh, great. Just great. His shoes may have cost £300, but that was a long time ago, and they now had a hole in the bottom that he couldn't afford to repair. After much vigorous foot-wiping on a handy clump of dandelions that were sprouting through the neglected cobbles, he knocked on the sad-looking office door with its 3 panes of mismatched glass. Silence. There was an electric bell attached to the jamb and a security light, but the number of wires sticking out of both made him fear for his personal safety. He tried the push-down handle instead. Surprisingly, it opened. The room was lit by a lone and flickering fluorescent light, suspended from the apex of the converted stable roof. The remainder of a piece of Christmas tinsel hung from it, an exotic turquoise caterpillar twisting in the breeze coming from the open door. To Harry's left was a row of wonky metal shelves, bulging with files, curling notebooks, and ancient yellowing newspapers. In front of them was a battered metal desk, whose surface was mostly taken up by a huge, archaic-looking computer monitor. Upon that desk there were also a round circle of wood with a metal spike on it, a model of a submarine, a glass etched with an old-fashioned dolphin and emitting what smelled suspiciously like an alcoholic substance, and a crumpled copy of the Racing Post. To his right, immediately beside the door, was an imposing brown wooden desk with a green leather surface and a dusty flat screen. The desk's top was as lifeless and devoid of personality as the moon itself. As there was no record of any living journalist keeping their workspace this tidy, he assumed that was where his predecessor had sat, before he had, according to Jasper, run off into the night. To the right of this desk, under the grimy windows, was yet another. It looked like a skip salvage job, but someone had decided to brighten it up by spraying it bubblegum pink and attaching fairy lights and a hand-painted notice to the front, declaring, "Hot Desk!" Exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Its top was encrusted with lidless pens, dishevelled reporters' notebooks, mismatched mugs with unicorn cartoons on them, 2 half-finished glasses of water, and various ornaments, including a panda, a polar bear, a pig, and an inflatable cactus. At the side, a flimsy-looking retro wire basket tower was so piled up with papers that it tottered like a drunken model on a catwalk. But it was what lay at the centre of the room that really grabbed his attention. On top of an old duvet, covered with a fleecy Union Jack blanket, was the biggest, floppiest, daftest-looking chocolate Labrador that Harry had ever seen.
"Hello, boy,"
he said, in what he hoped was a friendly voice.
"What are you doing here? Where is everyone?"
The dog regarded him with dark, solemn eyes. He bent forward to pat the creature. The dog seemed to like it, so he carried on.
"What's your name, then?"
He reached towards its worn leather collar to read the brass identity disc that dangled underneath, and then retreated with a yelp as the beast clamped its entire set of teeth round his right hand. "Christ!" he screeched, yanking it away. The dog growled. A faint set of red speckles on his hand proved it had drawn blood. Now he'd probably need a tetanus injection. He looked round. Across the room there was another office door with 2 mismatched glass panels in the upper part and the lower one badly repaired with hardboard. Must be the kitchen or the loo. He stepped towards it. The dog rose majestically and growled again. Shrinking to the perimeter wall, he proceeded to creep round until he could pull the door open with his foot, then slunk into a dank room containing mildewing back copies of the newspaper on shelves, a toilet cubicle, and a tiny sink, kettle, and unwashed mugs. Harry ran the cold tap. Nothing. He opened it a little more. The tap began to vibrate. He opened it another turn, and it made an explosive noise before water spurted out, making an appalling and inevitable beeline for his crotch. Horrified, he stared down. He looked as if he'd developed raging incontinence. Selecting the least crumpled paper towel by the sink, he wrapped it round his injured hand and tried to push the door to the newsroom back open. It wouldn't budge. He shoved again. The wood couldn't have swelled up in a few minutes. Maybe it had got jammed. Desperately, he pressed his face against the upper reeded glass panel and, looking down, saw an ominous brown blob. The devil dog again. "Get out of the way! Shoo!" More shoving. "Move! Move!" ordered Harry. It didn't. For a second, he allowed his memory to drift back to his time at the Daily News. A metropolitan paradise where ergonomic seats with memory foam cushions came as standard, along with beverages supplied by a well-known chain. In a situation almost unknown in British publishing, the kitchen fridge even had its own cleaning lady. He was jolted out of this daydream by a new sound, as if someone was moving around in the newsroom.
"Hello, Ignatius, darling. Are you all right? Are you warm enough? Shall I get you some tea?"
It sounded like a teenage girl. Harry gave the door an almighty shove. Unfortunately, the dog had chosen this moment to move, and so he barreled out of the kitchen-cum-dungeon and halfway across the office, tripping over the dog bed and landing face down on the sticky blue carpet tiles. When he rolled over and looked up, he found himself staring into a pair of hazel eyes. They belonged to a girl. She looked about 20, with thick hair the colour of salted caramel, curling round her face, which was dominated by a pair of over-large brown-framed glasses.
"You poor thing. Are you okay?"
He opened his mouth to answer, when he twigged that she was actually talking to the dog. "Hello, my name is Harry Hedges," he said, standing up and brushing himself down. "I think I'm right in saying that I'm probably your new editor?" The girl stared, the glasses emphasizing her huge eyes.
"Well, you should be more careful," she snapped. "You really scared poor Ignatius."
Ignatius? Is that dog yours, then? She smiled.
"Sort of. Isn't he gorgeous?"
"Very," he lied. "But he can't stay here."
"Stay here? He lives here."
She then proceeded to explain how, when she'd started a couple of years ago, aged 18, as the trainee reporter.
"Not that I've had any proper training. I've had to train myself."
Ignatius came to live in the office. "You can't have dogs in offices," said Harry, more firmly than he felt. "Health and safety won't allow it."
"Karl Lagerfeld had a cat, and I bet the Queen had corgis in her offices,"
said the girl, as she moved towards the pink desk. He couldn't argue with that. mainly because he had actually visited Her Late Majesty one time with his royal warrant-holder father to hand over a new ceremonial luxury waste paper basket, and had noted that she did indeed keep corgis in the royal office. "Look, he can stay for today. Then you'll have to take him home. Sorry, nothing against him, but it's health and safety." She looked upset. "Hey," he said, in an effort to get on the front foot. "I don't even know your name."
It's Hattie.
"Do you have another name?"
Watson. Like Dr. Watson, Sherlock's mate.
"Great. I love Sherlock Holmes."
So do I. He had a dog in his office too.
Only sometimes, thought Harry, but something told him that Miss Watson would be a tough nut to crack, especially where that mutt was concerned. And while he had been quite happy cracking tough nuts in his day, from El Rato to Princess Anne, he realised he'd never actually managed any staff, just been managed, and not always very well, come to think of it. Feeling less sure than he hoped he looked, Harry asked Hattie to make the coffee. Well, that was all right, wasn't it? It wasn't exploitation or anything. He was the editor. He could do this. Hattie pushed up her glasses and stalked into the kitchen. This bloke didn't look like an editor. Not that she knew many, she would have to acknowledge. He looked like that actor off those old romance films. He was good-looking and extremely posh, but she wondered, should she tell him about that dodgy stain across the front of his trousers? He'd guessed correctly that the empty desk was his. It was the biggest. It was also furthest from the office's two mean little radiators, which he wouldn't notice until winter, Hattie hoped. As she rattled the office mugs, she tapped at her mobile.
"Raimondo," she messaged. "New Ed here. Hurry up."
She prayed her colleague would see it before he got stuck into his morning bets. Ray Featherweight could, like most people these days, place his daily bet online. But he was old school, and besides, he fancied the woman behind the bookie's counter, even though, as Hattie had pointed out on several occasions,
"She's gay, you dafty."
As she walked back in with an instant coffee for Harry, she noticed him staring at the unoccupied desk.
"Here you are,"
she beamed, thumping down the chipped brown mug. "Oh."
"Something wrong, Mr. Hedges? Not enough milk?"
No, it's just that I'd normally have macchiato espresso." Hattie blinked. They didn't have any espresso or macchiato, whatever that was. Ray, her absent sub-editor colleague, only drank tea and the occasional nip of rum. That left Ignatius, who also liked tea, very milky, poured into his china bowl. Maybe I'll go out and see if I can get one. See a bit of the place. There must be one decent coffee shop in this town," Harry declared.
"Okay."
As he stood up, his landline rang.
"Hello?"
It sounded like an upper-class elderly woman, at the bottom of a particularly deep well.
"I'd like to speak to the editor."
"I am the editor," said Harry, straightening his back and enjoying a tiny thrill of importance.
"Are you sure?"
"Yes, madam. May I help you?"
"Indeed you may, but I'm not going to talk to you on this thing. I shall expect to see you at 11 a.m. tomorrow. I have a story for you."
He scrabbled in his desk drawer for a pen and asked if he could take a few details. The woman snorted.
"Surely you can spot the problem for yourself."
"Sorry, madam, you may have to enlighten me. I only arrived here about half an hour ago."
"What kind of timekeeping do you call that?"
He let it pass. "It's just so I can prepare in advance of our meeting," he busked. "I do think it's good to be prepared, don't you?"
"In that case," she said, "I can tell you that it will be about an extremely serious matter. Corruption on the town council."
Harry sagged. Town council corruption. Only about 1 million people had ever rung their local newspaper to inform them about this. In about 3 of the cases, it had actually proved to be true. "Do you have evidence of this alleged corruption?"
"I do indeed. Firstly, the town roundabout is a disgrace. You must have noticed."
He had, but he wasn't going to admit it, because it would only add to the bonfire of indignation that was blazing merrily down the line. But how was that corrupt? He had a feeling he'd soon find out. The woman continued.
"It's so bad, I had to conduct my own protest down there this morning. I nearly got run over by some idiot. Anyway, young man, I am vice-chairman of Piddlington in Bloom, and I can tell you now we won't even go through to the second round with a mess like that confronting the judges as they arrive. It's a death trap.
He wanted to point out that messy roundabouts were neither evidence of corruption nor portenders of sudden death, but felt he did not have all day, and so asked for the woman's details again.
Robarts! Mrs. Prudence Robarts. Thank you. I will see you tomorrow. Remember, 11 a.m. Good day.
He looked up to see the eyes of the office upon him.
Don't worry, Mr. Hedges, said Hattie. She's just a town busybody, always banging on about something. She's obsessed with that roundabout, but next month it'll be something else, you'll see.
He groaned inwardly. He didn't feel like going out now. Do you think you could go out and get me a real coffee or something? A proper one, with a lid on it, which actually tastes of coffee? He asked, simultaneously wrenching at his anorexic wallet, which he'd stuffed into his back pocket. He fished out £5 and pushed it towards her, and she smiled and stepped towards the door, Ignatius padding at her side. Harry dashed into the kitchen and swiftly tipped his coffee down the sink. He arrived back in the newsroom to be confronted by a round, moustached man, possibly in his 70s, ensconced at what had been the empty desk. This must be the other member of staff mentioned in his brief appointment letter, the chief, and indeed only, sub-editor.
"How do?" said the man, not standing up. "You must be—"
Harry Hedges, your new editor.
"Ray Featherweight."
The man coughed and shifted on his axis.
"Well, I don't know about you, Mr. Hedges, but there's the most disgusting smell in here. Someone should do something about it. It's not right we have to work in these conditions."
And with that, he heaved himself up and walked towards the kitchen. Harry bent down and sniffed in the direction of his beloved brogues. Something would definitely have to be done about that dog. Chapter 2. An exhaustive search of the office had revealed absolutely no instruction manual or any indication of how to revive the moribund newspaper website, whose most recent news story had been uploaded over 6 months ago. It had revealed a washbag and towel belonging to Ray.
"I wondered where that had got to."
A cupboard filled with bright metal tins of premium senior dog food and what appeared to be luxury dog biscuits.
Poor Ignatius has got sensitive digestion, said Hattie.
Harry decided to ignore her remark, given that she'd managed to get him some chain store Americano.
It's from the machine at the petrol station, which, if you ask me, is a major cause of global warming and litter.
The office search had also revealed that while the surface of Harry's desk was devoid of any accoutrement, save the flat screen, the same could not be said of the drawers, which were crammed with tatty reporters' notebooks, defunct biros, old business cards, and several obsolete phones. Worse still, there were also the remains of a packet of pork scratchings, which looked as if they'd been collected from the feet of Tutankhamun's mummy. Harry recoiled as he slowly and carefully emptied each drawer into a plastic rubbish sack and deposited it in the kitchen, ready for bin day. He had insisted on a complete office clean-up and managed to get a resentful Ray and a mutinous Hattie to dust and hoover the dismal space.
Poor Ignatius is scared of the vacuum cleaner,
said Hattie, which presumably explained why the floor had a carapace of crumbs all over it. I don't care if Ignatius is scared, he said. This place is a pigsty.
I'm not surprised, lad, piped up Ray. Didn't you know it used to be a pigsty? They used to slaughter the pigs out there, on the cobbles.
His laugh was brought to an abrupt end by a violent bout of coughing. The gruesome images did nothing to improve Harry's growing headache, which had started with the flickering fluorescent light above him. It was like a medieval form of torture, as were Ignatius's intermittent farts, which were of Chernobyl-like intensity. He'd busied himself with knocking out press releases, instructing Hattie to scroll through the local Facebook to see what people are talking about, and visit her contacts, as well as suggesting she walk the streets and look at the for sale and wanted notices in the local newsagents and post office. They are still great places to find stories. People selling off weird things or reporting lost pets, he told her, remembering his early reporting days. Probably at the thought of writing lost pet stories, Hattie brightened up. I'm on it, she said, packing up her pink rucksack with her crumpled notebook and clattering through the door again. Ray made to move too, back to the betting shop, if Harry had guessed rightly, to collect yesterday's winnings. Not you, Ray. I need to understand how the paper's all laid out. Ray explained it was done on his time-worn monitor, via an editing package so ancient it predated the 21st century.
"At least until we get to understand that newfangled thing,"
said Ray.